logical. On the other hand, there is a completely different sense of meaning which has nothing to do with language. When somebody says to you in a private conversation, man, you know, I don't know what it is, but I feel like my life has no meaning. You know, I'm living a life that's not meaningful. You're not going to go, wait a minute, let me bring a Webster dictionary, and I'm going to give you a definition for your life. Or if you just give me a minute, I'll disambiguate your life. You know, your friend would look at you like, huh? You know, now it has even less meaning than before. What your friend is saying, and this is what you should understand if you're empathetic with him, is my life has no meaning. He means, or he tries to say, I don't make a difference in this world. I am not significant to anybody. I'm not relevant to anything that happens. I'm not important to anyone. Importance, relevance, significance have nothing to do with language. Significance and signification are entirely different things. This has to do with relevance, importance, making a difference. Now, from the last expression, which by the way exists in many languages, not only English, you find it in Spanish, for instance, exactly the same, and you find it in French, exactly the same. You can imagine that this is very important for Deleuze. Deleuze, the philosopher of difference, must have immediately understood that when something makes a difference, is something that you should think philosophically about, because it's making a difference, and you're the philosopher of difference. Now, significance has to, when you assess the significance or the importance of something, you can assess it relative to things that have nothing to do with language. You know, you're watching a carpenter that's nailing some things and is sanding the wood, then is making a bunch of other operations, and then in the middle of all these things that do make sense because he's building a table, he does a little dance, you know, and then goes back to nailing and stuff. And then at the end of the thing, you go, I'm trying to understand what he's saying. Did that little dance make a difference? You know, was that little dance significant to the act of building a table? Or was this guy some kind of Zorba carpenter kind of guy? You know? And you normally would say, it isn't important. I can do the same table by learning how to sand, by then learning how to cut, and then learning how to nail, without doing the little dance. Because the little dance doesn't make a difference. And you're not judging a linguistic thing. You're judging something that may have been done with a mouth shut. Nailing, sanding, cutting. You're judging non-linguistic practices. You're judging the exercise of a skill, the exercise of carpenter skills that are know-how. So you're going to make assessments of significance about entirely non-linguistic things, and that shows you that significance is not reduced to language. On the other hand, you can also make judgments of significance about linguistic things. You can ask yourself, what did that famous Martin Luther King speech about I have a dream made a difference? And you have to say, yes, it made a difference. It was a great speech. It was a speech that may have turned the tide in the civil rights movement. And if it wasn't that critical, it certainly made a difference in the civil rights movement. It inspired people. So you can judge I have a dream speech in terms of its signification, but also in terms of its impact, in terms of its importance to other people, in terms of the difference that it made in other people's lives. But the fact that you can judge speeches by their significance doesn't make significance linguistic, because significance or assessments or judgments of significance can be made about all kinds of different practices. Now, when we were talking about the linguisticality of experience, one typical source of confusion there is that when you have an Eskimo judging 29 kinds of snow, you know, your typical Kantian would tell you, well, but for him, those kinds of snow have meaning. They have a meaning in his life. And he's confusing, by saying that, he's confusing these two things. Because he thinks that he's saying, you know, those 29 kinds of snow have semantic content for him. When in fact what he tries to say is, those 29 words for snow, in other words, 29 forms of snow make a difference in Eskimo's life, which is true. Certain kinds of snow are good for building igloos, so that makes a difference in his building practices. Other kinds of snow are misleadingly solid, so they invite you to walk, but you should know that you should not walk on them because you drown. Other kinds of snow, and so on for all the different categories. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing again. When you do not believe in the linguisticality of experience, when you believe like Hume that experience is about intensities given a stability by routine and habit, you can still believe that all those intensities, particularly when grouped as objects that play roles, and roles that make up scenes, have significance for the perceiver. They have importance. You typically pay attention and focus your attention on what has importance. Everything else goes back into the background. And attention is a form of energy. It's a form of labor. It's a material thing. Let me give you an example to make this point more concrete. When in the middle of the 19th century, around 1840s, the first penny newspapers came out. They came out in London and New York roughly at the same time. They were sold for a penny. So they were very cheap, clearly, and they were cheap news, typical National Enquirer type of things, or human interest type of stories, not hard news. But they were so cheap that they could not pay for themselves. In other words, by selling the newspaper, you did not make the money back. So what did they do? They invented advertising. Advertising is a way of selling the attention of the reader to the advertiser. So you sell your penny newspaper, you put your news, stories, and so on, and then you put some advertising for different things. And because attention is a scarce resource, you cannot pay attention to everything at the same time. Magicians take advantage of the fact that attention is limited, but they distract you with one hand while they do their trick with the other hand, because they know that the hand is faster than the eye. That are at that level of intensive quantities, speed. The hand, if you use misdirection, if you drive your attention in one direction, then you cannot be paying attention to the other hand while the other hand is doing the trick. So magicians are experts at exploiting the fact that attention is a scarce resource. It's a form of energy. It's a form of labor. And what penny newspapers do, and of course after penny newspapers, that business model was inherited by radio, then it was inherited by TV, and now it was inherited by the internet, all of which basically make money by selling ads. It's a form of unpaid labor. You're giving something for free, broadcast television or broadcast radio, as long as the people pay attention to the ads. So attention is another important bodily function, which is non-linguistic, which animals have, by the way. You know, your dog, your cat pays attention to certain things and doesn't pay attention to many others. Even insects, like the honeybee that I was talking about at the beginning of today's class, that pays attention to colors, pays attention to aromas, pays attention to many pointed shapes that may be flowers, but not to sounds. Because bees don't have any use for sounds. Sounds don't lead you to nectar in flowers. Whereas color leads you to nectar in flowers, aroma leads you to nectar in flowers, and many pointed shapes lead you to nectar in flowers. So even at the level of bees, evolution has focused already their attention on what is significant, what is important for their lives, what makes a difference to the bee, and everything else send it to the background as an undifferentiated thing that you don't have to pay any attention to, because it doesn't matter